And I see a lot of young entrepreneurs get started in something and then they want to do everything. And then once you start doing everything, that's really the kiss of death. Because once you start going into the forest and you're taking a shotgun and you're trying to shoot the animals or whatever, it's very hard to be precise. You know, and I tell people, focus on one thing, do it supremely well. And then once that thing is really maxed out where you can't do any more with it, that's when you go on to the second project.
Hello, folks, and welcome. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Louis Spagnuolo in the Mastermind. Louis currently serves as the chairman of Illuminati Trust, LLC, a diversified monetization company, CEO of Don't Look Media, chairman of PrivateJet.com, CEO of VIP Risk Advisors, partner in MDW Insurance, and you know what, I'm probably missing a few in there, but pretty impressive bio read. But Louis has also been recognized in nearly 300 major media publications and is a sought-after expert in internet monetization with an emphasis on asset acquisition. He also is an active contributor to such charities as Make-A-Wish Foundation, the Special Olympics, Camp Fiesta's Children's Cancer Caring Center, the Caring Bridge, the Haven Home for Boys, Stop Hunger, Habitat for Humanity, and Charlie's Fund. Another impressive list. But Louis, welcome to the show, man. You are doing a lot of cool stuff.
Thank you for having me, Brad. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. It's going to be a fun conversation. And I know that just based on some of the things you're involved in, I'm excited to understand, you know, what your background was and your entrepreneurial journey. So to kick things off, I would love just to understand, you know, where your roots stem from and what got you interested in entrepreneurship in the beginning.
Really, you know, the truth of the matter is it started from desperation because I didn't grow up with any kind of money or family connections or anything like that. And I felt that if I was going to do it, the only way to really be successful is to control your own destiny. And while at college, I kind of realized that, you know, everything costs money and it costs money to eat and to live. And not having that money really motivated me to figure out a way to basically look at problems and figure out a way to solve them and then try to monetize that. And that's kind of how the whole thing started. And I kind of stuck with that simple formula of trying to identify, okay, we have a problem here. How can we come up with a solution and then turn that into a business?
Nice. So do you recall what your first entrepreneurial venture was?
The first venture was actually working security at nightclubs in Miami. And that's kind of a funny story a lot of people know about because that was how I got to meet The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, at UM. And basically, I was just doing security as a bouncer and getting paid to throw guys out of the nightclub so they could keep, you know, the cash registers ringing, so to speak. And I ended up meeting him, and that kind of spawned a whole relationship and stuff like that. And then it kind of led to other things, going to South America, and we were exporting construction equipment. We got into exporting cell phones because cell phones were just getting popular back then. And it kind of just took off from there, you know, one step at a time to climb the mountain, so to speak.
That's really cool. So I guess starting off with that cell phone one, how did that get started? And because most people think when they're starting a business, typically it's in their area, their country. What brought you down to South America to pursue that?
Basically, it was kind of a strange moment out of frustration. I had my cell phone that I just bought, and I was upset about something, and I grabbed the phone, and I threw it as hard as I could against the wall, and it smashed into like a million pieces. And I couldn't believe I just did that. And when I went to go pick up the pieces, I noticed that in the cell phone itself, there were AAA batteries. And I was really surprised. I was like, wow, you know, I thought the batteries were going to be some like special green chemical, you know, high-tech thing or whatever. And I realized, I'm like, wow, all this is AAA batteries glued together and then wrapped in a plastic, you know, container, so to speak. And I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. Like, how could these be $200? Like, I couldn't understand why they were so expensive at the time for the cell phones. So I started doing a little researching and digging and come to find out that I was able to replicate those batteries for a very low price and a very high profit margin. So we ended up doing that, and we realized that the United States, the market was closed because all the big companies basically controlled the market. So they wouldn't allow us to have distribution. But outside the U.S., there was really no constraints. And really, it was just one thing led to another. I had some friends that were from South America, and their families were pretty well off. And we ended up partnering, and before you know it, we started distributing our products down there.
Nice. And so in those early days of entrepreneurship, were there any lessons that really stood out to you that helped you to become successful in that venture, that now you try to replicate in everything that you do?
Yeah, there was countless lessons because we made so many mistakes back then. And, some of them that just come to mind was always understanding that sometimes even if you make every decision perfect, if you execute perfect, there's still things that are out of your control that could go wrong. So you always have to prepare for that. And you always have to have a cushion and have some insulation that in case things go sideways that may not even be your fault, that financially you'll be able to keep sustaining things. And that was one of the big things we learned, because as young kids, we didn't really know too much. And we didn't really understand that things out of our control could happen and really have a negative effect on our business. So ever since then, we always realized that no matter how good we were doing, we would always kind of prepare for that rainy day. And a lot of times I see entrepreneurs now, they'll go all in, they'll put everything they have into it, and then they'll encounter like a hiccup, and then boom, it'll blow them out. And that's tough because sometimes they can be so close, to succeeding. And if they had just, had some more staying power, maybe had some more reserves, things like that, they probably could have got over that hill, So that's the one thing we do is make sure we're always financially capitalized, because you don't know what could happen.
So thinking of that kind of tactically, we have people listening who are in different industries, so I'm sure it varies widely. But is there any kind of rule of thumb that you use when or you advise people on when preparing from a financial perspective to make the leap into entrepreneurship, or say they've started a company and things are starting to roll and they're seeing some profitability, but do you have any advice for people of kind of where they should be, what they should be setting aside for those rainy days?
I think first and foremost, you should never quit your day job. And when you're going to transition from, an employee to an entrepreneur, you always want to keep your day job until you get to the point where you physically can't do both. And your business that you created is generating just so much money, more than you're even making at your job. That's when you realize that, hey, okay, now's the time to quit my job and really focus on this. Because I think a lot of times people transition too quickly, and then they run into financial challenges and they're not able to overcome those challenges, and then it really becomes a disaster. And that's one of the things I see people doing, because everybody wants to do things fast. And I tell people the key to succeeding in business is you have to be patient. And a lot of times when I tell people that, they think that I'm saying you should go slow. And I'm saying, no, there's a difference between patience and going slow. No one wants to go slow. We all want to go really fast. But if you're going really fast and you're crashing into things, it's going to be hard to get to the finish line. Whereas if you're patient and you're making sure you have the right navigation, the right trajectory, everything's really planned meticulously, it's going to be much harder for you to crash that car and much easier for you to cross that finish line.
Yeah, and that's so interesting. I love that advice, because a lot of times we hear sort of the opposite, especially in this Shark Tank world that we live in today. And we're hearing this one say, oh, you're still working your job. I want to see that you're all in, that you're committed to this.
That's the worst advice you could get. It's sad because a lot of times, like I see online with guys selling success and even TV shows, what people don't realize is on TV show, that's entertainment. It's not real. So they're going to say things that are going to be entertaining to the audience, but not necessarily accurate or correct. And the same thing with selling success. A lot of people are selling success, but they've never had success. So they'll talk in generalities, or they'll say something that sounds good, but in reality, in an application, it doesn't really transfer that way.
Yeah, no, I think you're so right there. And you started to touch on it a little bit, but you mentioned that you had some struggles, you had some failures, and those were kind of the key things that you learned from. Are there any other specific stories of a failure in your entrepreneurial journey or a challenge that you had to overcome that really transformed the way that you approach business and has had a positive impact in the long run?
The thing is, I've had so many failures. I tell people that I hold the world record for the most amount of failures. And it's true, because like everybody views me as where I am now, and they think I'm joking around, but I'm really not, because I've had so many failures. That's the only thing that really ever taught me how to do this and give me those secrets and teach me, what's the recipe and what path you have to go on, because you learn when you fail. When you succeed, there's really nothing to learn. So most of it is gained through failure. And one of the things I always catch myself and everybody around us trying to do is I feel like the biggest threat is really distraction. I feel like a lot of times people will start a company, they'll want to produce a product or service, but then during that course, the other opportunities will creep in. And they'll be like, wow, look at this. This is great. We could also do this. We could do that. We could do all these other things. So they go from one like finite thing that they want to do where they have supreme focus on. And then all of a sudden, now they're doing 5 different things and they're running in 5 different directions. And it makes it very difficult to succeed. So whenever we're starting a new business or we have a new idea, I tell everyone, don't get distracted. The threats are always going to be the noise that's surrounding us. The people that are trying to come in and want to partner with us and want us to change what we're doing or do things differently or add something new. And that's when you really run into problems. And I see a lot of young entrepreneurs get started in something and then they want to do everything. And then once you start doing everything, that's really the kiss of death. Because once you start going into the forest and you're taking a shotgun and you're trying to shoot the animals or whatever, it's very hard to be precise. You know, and I tell people, focus on one thing, do it supremely well. And then once that thing is really maxed out where you can't do any more with it, that's when you go on to the second project.
Yeah, that makes sense. And at the same time, you look at the bio that I read for you, and you have your hand in so many different things.
Right.
So that you
but here's what people don't see. What people don't see is that's 25 years of work. You know what I'm saying? So it looks like a lot, but if you break it down over 25 years, it's actually not that impressive. You know, because 25 years is a long time, and it gives you a long time to do things. It's just that I've gotten good at being very precise and having that singular focus to build something. And then once it's built, I'm able to bring in other people who can manage it for me and keep it going. And that frees me up to do a new project. But if I didn't keep that discipline and keep that system, you know, all these companies may not have ever flourished.
Right. And then it brings in that advice you'd given previously of being patient and doing things slowly and really having that focus as you're doing one thing at a time.
Exactly. That's really one of the keys with young entrepreneurs. They want to succeed so badly and they want to succeed so fast that a lot of times their car kind of runs off the road, you know, and then the guy that's driving a little slower, but he's more cautious and his navigation's all programmed and he's all set up and he has his maps and he has enough fuel and he took all the precautions. Maybe he wasn't driving as fast to start, but he's going to get to the finish line sooner.
I love that. And so you also mentioned that you have the world record for failures and that these are the things that you learn from. Where do you think you got that mindset to accept that failure as a learning opportunity and to take that and learn from it and move on to the next thing? Is that something that you just had to learn the hard way by continuously failing, or is that something you think that came from your younger years? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a combination. Like, I've always liked to study people who have achieved greatness, whether it's in sports or business or what have you. And the one thing I learned is no one ever starts out as the champion. Nobody. You know, whether it's, you know, Mike Tyson in boxing, he was a contender and he had to, you know, climb up the ranks and then he became a champion. You look at, like, for football, Tom Brady. He was drafted in, I think, the 6th round. He was the 3rd string quarterback. He started at the bottom and had to slowly climb his way up. You know, so no one starts at that champion. So you always have to learn, you know, in the beginning about whatever profession you're going to or whatever vertical you're going to go into. You have to go through that learning phase where you do make those mistakes and you learn everything you can about it. And then eventually you can become a contender and you can become the champion. But no one becomes a champion before they become a contender.
Makes total sense. Yeah. And so obviously you've learned from your failures and being able to take those lessons and apply them to other future opportunities to achieve success. What role have other people in your network, mentors, if you participate in mastermind groups or anything like that, what role have other people played in your success?
You know, it's funny because people ask me all the time, like, who was your mentor? Who's the one taught you? And I said, truthfully, I never really had a mentor. I wasn't fortunate enough to be in a situation like that. So all the people that basically I look to maybe as mentors is basically people that I've read about in books or online or things like of that nature, where I've been able to study them and seen the things that they've done, seen the mistakes that they've made, and then be able to take that information and apply it to me. There's a lot of times I hear, especially young people, the millennials, they all want mentors. The problem is there's a very small amount of mentors and there's an enormous amount of people that want to be apprentices. And the numbers just don't work. So when I tell people don't get frustrated, find another way to still achieve the same thing. And nowadays, with information basically being free and there's an unlimited amount of it, you can learn from so many people without them actually mentoring you in a formal capacity. Because someone like me, people ask me all the time, could you mentor me? And I said, listen, I would love to mentor you. I just don't have unlimited time. If I had unlimited time, then it'd be great. I can mentor everybody that wants to succeed and work hard and things like that. But because that's not realistic, you have to find another way to still accomplish the same goal.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. And the world we live in today, the information is there. It's at our fingertips.
Exactly.
And those finite number of mentors and people who really have achieved substantial success are typically leaving clues. They're writing books. They're being guests on podcasts. They're telling their story in most cases. And if you're diligent and go out and find that information and consume it, then you can still get that same impact by learning from others' mistakes, by seeing how they achieve their success and replicating that the best you can. So it's out there. It just takes a little bit of extra work instead of having a cup of coffee.
And I think the millennials don't realize how fortunate they are, because years ago, before the internet, information was like priceless, because information was constricted, it was contained. It would stay in people's heads. And if you weren't able to take it out of the person's head, you would never be able to learn it. But now with the internet, all the information is right in front of you. So it's almost like you have too much information. And people sometimes, I think, get paralyzed by that, where there's so much information that they don't know where to go or what direction. And I tell everyone, don't worry about planning out the entire race. Just start the race. And as you're running, you'll start to learn what direction to run in.
Yeah, amen. And for people listening too, it also brings an opportunity. So if you don't have an entrepreneurial idea right now for your business, you're right. So many people are bogged down by paralysis by analysis. But if you're able to become a source that people know, like, and trust, and bring information from a given topic into one place where it's easily digested and consumed, people are willing to pay for that too. It's not, there's the free options out there. But people also pay for convenience. So it does bring an opportunity for an entrepreneur who's ready to hustle and bring that information into one place and make it convenient for people too.
Exactly. And that information is priceless, because like I said, before the internet, people would pay thousands on top of thousands of dollars to learn that information. And now we have basically an infrastructure in place where you can pretty much get all the information you need to go after any endeavor. So it's incredible. We live in an incredible time now where information is just abundant. And really what's important now is the ability to execute. Execution is so critical right now, because people come to me all the time. I have a great idea. And I try to explain to them, everybody has great ideas now. There's no more limitations on ideas. There's an overabundance of them. What's important now is, are you able to execute on that idea? Because that idea is really worthless unless you're able to execute upon it.
That's so true. So let's talk about that a little bit, the ability to execute. So what does that boil down to? Because you're right. I mean, we've all had ideas that we then have come up later in a future business. And we're like, damn, I was the one who thought of Uber, but of course, you never executed on it. So what do you tell people who need some clarity on the ability to execute? What does that mean for you?
I think you have to be smart enough and humble enough to understand what you actually don't know in business. And then once you're able to identify what you don't know, then it's your job to seek out people who do know that information or do know that skill or ability to execute. And then when you bring those together, then it makes things much easier. But a lot of times I'll see millennials thinking that they can execute on all different aspects of business. And I think that's almost impossible, because nobody knows every aspect of business. So you have to humble yourself and say, okay, I have strengths in sales, or I have strengths in management, or I have strengths in accounting, but these other areas where I'm weak at, that's where I have to bring in people who do know how to execute on them. And then when we create that team, now we really have that solution that we need.
Yeah. And so for people who are also just getting started and they understand that concept of building a team, and they would love to go out and get the best in that area that they're weak at, but they may not have the capital right now to go out and hire somebody for that position. What's your advice to them?
You ask the people questions then, because most people are nice enough to give, at least a small amount of their time, and they'll answer questions and they'll give them the best insight. And then sometimes they'll even recommend someone to you. Say, hey, I can't help you with this, but this person may be able to help you, or maybe look in this direction or go in this area. There's so many resources available. I think it's just a question of how motivated are you, and are you willing to recognize where your strengths and weaknesses are, and then you have the ability to find the answers that you don't know just yet. Because a lot of times there's a skill and being able to find the solution, to find the answer. A lot of times people will come to me and there'll be this big problem and they'll be like, well, why aren't you nervous? Why aren't you worried? And I'm like, the reason why I'm not worried is I know I don't know the answer right now, but I know how to find it and I know how to get to it. So I know it's only a matter of time till we solve this.
Right. Yeah, that's a great mindset. What advice do you have for aspiring entrepreneurs who haven't started executing on their idea or still trying to figure out what that right idea is for them, but they believe that entrepreneurship is the path that they want to go down and that's where their future is headed?
I think they should always start with identifying a problem. Because a lot of times I see entrepreneurs, they'll come up with a product and it'll be like a nice product, and I'll ask them, well, what problem does it solve? And they'll say it doesn't solve any problem. And then I'll say, well, why should I buy it? And they say, well, you should buy it because it's cool or because it's nice or because something like that. And I'm like, that's great. Maybe you'll get a couple people that may want that. But unless you could solve a problem or you could do something substantially better than the way it's being done now, it's going to be very hard to build, a business of substance unless you have those things. And then once they get to that point, I ask them, what do you have for competitive advantages? And a lot of times they'll come back and they'll say, well, I'm a hard worker. And then I try to explain to them, well, hard working is not a competitive advantage. That's almost like a norm right now. Everybody basically works hard. Like no one doesn't work hard. And so that's not really an advantage. And then I'll ask, is there any barriers to entry? Meaning if someone like me who has more money, if I want to go into this vertical, am I going to be able to beat you because of the resources I have? So a lot of times I'll ask them, do you have a patent on that product? Or do you have a patent on that process or procedure or things like that? Or do you have something that's going to make it difficult for people to compete? Do you have some specialized knowledge? Is there something that you put together? Things like that I think are really important. And then once we put those together, we say, okay, do you have a business where you can have a clear path for liquidity event? And a lot of times people don't understand that. A lot of people will start a business, but they'll do a business where no one will ever buy it. And the whole idea of starting a company, building a company, is for you to sell it. Because when you sell your company, that's when you make the most money. You don't make the most money operating your company, working, getting a paycheck. That's nice. That gets you in a position for success. But the real success comes when you sell the company and you get that lump sum of cash that could change your life.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess a slightly varied question that I'm curious if it'd be a different answer is if you could go back in time, hop in a time machine and talk to Lewis when he was still bouncing at that nightclub, is there any advice that you would give to that version of yourself pre all of this business success?
Definitely. I mean, I would talk to that guy for like a year straight. That guy back then was very aggressive. He wanted to be successful, but he didn't have a roadmap. So he was just doing it basically on determination, perseverance, sheer will as how he was trying to get some traction. But nowadays it's so much different that, I would go back to that person and again, keep it very simple. And I'll say, are you solving a problem? If you're not solving a problem, that's going to put you at a big disadvantage. You better have an incredible product if it's not solving any type of problem. And that really is almost like a litmus test to anybody that's starting a company. Like that's such an easy question to ask and to answer. And a lot of times they say, well, we're not really solving a problem, but we have a cool idea. Well, no one's going to pay money for a cool idea. People pay money when you solve a problem. So I think if you kind of really make things more simplistic, I think the better off you're going to be, because I tell people all the time, it's very easy to make things complicated. Anybody in America can do that. It's very easy. It's very difficult to make things simple. And simple is what's really important because simple sells. And people gravitate towards things that are simple. People shy away from things that are complicated because there's fear. There's the element of fear that they're not going to understand it. So the more simple you can make your business, the more success you're going to have.
Yeah, it's that whole keep it simple, stupid concept.
It really is in so many different ways, but things like that, people hear that and they kind of scoff at it. But if you just take that and you understand the meaning behind it, then you'll probably have a better chance of success.
Well, Lewis, I think that you've dropped some value bombs here today, and people are going to be fired up after this conversation, and they're also going to have some tactical questions like, what problem am I solving, to ask themselves. If they want to learn more about you or follow you or anything like that, is there anywhere that you might point them where they can learn more or check you out?
Probably the easiest way is just on LinkedIn. I have a ton of people that are always emailing me questions and ask me things, and I do my best to always answer them. So usually I would tell people start right there. And then if there's something that's engaging, that resonates with me, then we could take it, offline to email or phone call or what have you. But I always tell people, let's start at LinkedIn and, we'll kind of see what's going on.
Lewis, thank you so much for joining us today. I know that my mind is churning. This is a great conversation to get people thinking about, where they need to be started, or if they have started, what they need to be calibrating on to really achieve that mega success that you've been able to achieve, and to stay focused and answer those simple questions. So we appreciate you being here.
Fantastic. It was a real pleasure, Brad.
Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, would you mind doing me an enormous favor? Could you drop a quick rating or review right there in your Apple Podcasts app on your phone? It helps so much in growing the show and helping more people find it. And when more people listen, we get better guests to come teach us cool stuff. It would mean the absolute world to me. Thank you so much, and we will see you next week.